Hey everyone, it is April 3, 2014. I'm Rene Ritchie, and right now we're going to talk about WWDC 2013. We're going to talk about the new iWork apps, and we're going to talk about all the news in the week of Apple. This is the iMore Show. Joining me, as always, freshly deplaned from Moscone Center and Macworld, the one and only Peter Cohen. How are you, Peter?
I am fine, Renee. How was your trip back from San Francisco?
It was all right. So I like direct flights way better than when you have to. I forget what they're called, but when you have to change planes. Connecting flights.
And I completely agree with you.
Because inevitably, like especially if you go through Canada, you have to go. The customs is always on the Canadian side because there's far fewer airports, which means U.S. customs agents, they don't need as many of them, so they just put customs on the Canadian side. And going through customs again and security again, I would just inevitably miss flights and spend 9 hours in the Toronto airport trying to understand why they considered gnocchi with cheese poutine, because nobody does that.
This is not over exaggeration. They actually did this.
I went to the restaurant to try and get some food, and they had poutine that was made with gnocchi and cheese, and it was just not right.
So it was poutine-oid. It wasn't actual poutine.
I don't know what they're doing in Toronto anymore.
Because the recipe for poutine is pretty basic, right? You need cheese curds, you need gravy, and you need French fries.
It is a recipe simple enough for people in Toronto to follow. That is my contention.
Wow, that sounds vaguely racist.
No, I mean, most people in Toronto came from Montreal anyway, so it's, I mean. Anyway, so the point is, it's a direct flight. It takes longer to get there, of course, than it is to get back. And I do go kind of stir-crazy because at least on the flight back, we actually had Wi-Fi. First time ever on Air Canada I've seen Wi-Fi.
Holy cow.
Yes.
Was this plane from the future?
Didn't look like it. It looked like it had been retrofitted, but, you know, one advantage. You still, in Canada, you still can't, on Canadian flights, you still can't use electronics during takeoff and landing, but at least there was Wi-Fi.
Was there sort of a retro steampunky vibe going on with all these exposed wires and, you know, large tubes blowing steam or something?
I wish. No, it was the same pterodactyl with stirrups that, you know, we always use.
Oh, okay, all right.
How was your flight back?
You know, it was fine. Virgin America, you know, has a very comfortable economy class, and they have Wi-Fi on board if you're willing to pay the ridiculous exorbitant fee for it. I think it's $32 to use it once, or $39 to subscribe to it for the rest of your life.
Ours
$39 per month.
Sponsored by American Express, which was nice.
Yeah, don't count on that for very long.
I
remember getting GoGo in-flight or whatever the hell it's called for $10 at one point or another a couple of years ago. So, you know, the cost has definitely gone up. But, you know, Macworld was a lot of fun. I was very happy to see you there, Renee. I had a great time. It was the first time that I'd been there in about 3 years, so a lot's changed. But, you know, the more they change, the more they stay the same.
Yeah, and if you missed any of our coverage, I mean, we did the show last week live from Macworld. Sadly, they couldn't do video, but the audio is up on the RSS feed and in iTunes. Peter and I did a bunch of stuff at the show. I was lucky enough to somehow con my way onto the keynote panel with Jason Snell, Red Girl Says, Dan Morin, and her name's Christina. I shouldn't say Red Girl Says, but that's how I still remember her from the Gingercast. And Ben Beharon, who's been on the Vector Show with us quite a bit. Then we also did Vector Live with Matt Drance, who was former Apple evangelist, and Don Melton, who built WebKit and Safari at Apple, and that was at least for me, a fascinating show. Then we did Iterate with Pacific Helm, which is Louis Mantilla, Brad Ellis, and Jesse Char, very famous Apple designers. Sebastian DeWitt, who's currently at Double Twist, but might have some stitched leather in his background. And Clarko, who was at Square but is now at Fitbit. And it was most interesting to me to hear how, I mean, we had them on the show 6 months ago when iOS 7 first shipped, and they had significant problems with it. And now they were all in. I mean, Mantilla was yelling, the grid is life! So make sure if you haven't already listened to those shows. We had Paul Kent and Michael T. Rose Paul Kent of Macworld, Michael T. Rose of Tua on the iMore show. I had an absolute blast, Peter.
Yeah, Mike Rose would have been our very special guest star if this had been a 70s primetime show.
Yes, and he's always great. So if you missed any of it, just go to imore.com/Macworld2014. You'll find all the shows, write-ups on all the segments. Peter and I, well, Peter did most of them. We did a bunch of videos with the Macworld video crew, which was great. I did a couple sessions there, one on iCloud, one on sensors and Siri and Touch ID. They didn't record that session, so I might redo it, Peter, because a lot of people asked me about it.
Interesting. Okay, yeah. Awesome. And yeah, lots of videos from the show. And we uncovered some pretty cool stuff, I thought.
Baby Panther is asking, what was the most surprising thing at Macworld? Do you have an answer for that, Peter?
The most surprising thing at Macworld was, well, the elephant that wasn't in the room this year, or that was in the room that nobody was talking about this year, or actually a lot of people were talking about it, was Microsoft. What metaphor am I trying to torture here? You know, what it is Microsoft was the 800-pound gorilla at this year's show. It was the thing that we were all talking about on Thursday. You know, and it's all because of Office for iPad. So that sort of overshadowed the show, I guess, at least for part of it. But yeah, that was probably the biggest theme that ran through the show. Lots of great stuff to see, though. I mean, you know, gear galore. If you want photo lenses for your iPhone, there were several choices. There was lots of really cool software. There was cool furniture too. I'm really thinking of picking up one of these standing desk things, so I can.
Yeah, I'm about ready to order one.
Yeah, I've just got to get some new carpet put in my floor, and then I'm going to get one. So that's actually happening tomorrow, so I'm moving forward on that. So you should see the office look a little different sometime in the next few weeks.
Nice. Okay,
yes.
Awesome. So Macworld is now done. We do have all those archives for you. But no sooner do we get back, Peter, and this was a surprise to me. Macworld was going to be in June. It was going to be in early June. I did not expect them to announce it this soon. I would, if they were planning to announce this soon, I would have thought that Apple people would be way more stressed than they seemed to be last week.
Yeah, indeed. And I mean, admittedly, I didn't, really see Apple people the same way that you did. But just, based on past experience, I don't think that we were really expecting WWDC to be announced right now. And it also seems like they're moving the actual event up about a week from where they've had it sort of at historical levels in the past.
Yeah, so for those of you who didn't see it, early this morning, I think it was around 9 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. Pacific, Apple put out a press release announcing WWDC 2014. They put up their WWDC webpage on developer.apple.com, and the date is Monday, June 2nd. It kicks off Monday, June 2nd in Moscone West, its traditional home. And I was impressed with a couple things. First, for the first time, Peter, they're doing a lottery system for tickets.
Indeed. The WWDC tickets have been literally the hottest ticket in town for the last several years. Really, ever since people started piling on to do iOS development. There's been such a huge community of developers who are really anxious to get in front of Apple engineers, get their code optimized, learn about the latest technologies that are going to be in upcoming operating system updates. It all kind of it's such an immersive experience, and it's so important for them that it's been really hard to get tickets. Tickets have sold out in, what was it last year, Renee? It was
seconds. It was like 45 or some ridiculous amount of seconds.
Yeah, which just shows you that taking it to a lottery system is the only way that Apple can really fairly divvy up the tickets to go. So I think the system that they've come up with is good. You've got until April 7th if you're a registered Apple developer, either on the iOS or OS X side, to get your entry in. It doesn't make you put in a credit card number or anything, so you're not on the hook for the ticket. You're just on the hook for a chance to buy the ticket. Mm-hmm. Definitely a sane way to go, and that still doesn't mean, though, that lots of people aren't going to be disappointed and aren't actually going to be able to attend WWDC this year.
So here's the thing. The chat room is asking a lot of questions about Macworld. We didn't cover it broadly today because the whole show last week, the whole first half of it, was all about our favorite things from Macworld. So if you're interested in that, just go back and listen to last week's show, and we go over all our favorites from the floor.
And please listen to it. I mean, that was a great show.
Yeah, we had the guy who runs it on. You can't ask for more than that.
Indeed.
Yeah, so the lottery system, for me, they're doing a couple things that are interesting. Firstly, Apple just cannot handle the load of people. Apple used to not sell out WWDC, back in the early days of the Mac. iOS changed everything because there's just hundreds of millions of devices and hundreds of thousands of developers, and you can't fit them in Moscone Center. They have room for 1,000 engineers, and I think they said 5,000 or 6,000 developers, and that's it. So there's no way to increase that. I mean, they can increase their DTS teams, their developer technical support teams, to try to handle more stuff outside WWDC. They're already doing tech talks around the world. They travel to different cities and give like mini WWDCs, but they just can't scale because even if they got a bigger venue, there's not enough Apple engineers, and they can't afford to do multiple ones because no one can really get any work done at Apple when they're at WWDC. So what they did is they took the pressure off the system by doing the lotteries. So now everyone has an equal chance of getting a ticket.
Theoretically.
But what they're also doing that I think is genius is they're going to be, last year already they did turnarounds on the sessions same day. I mean, it was the evangelist team and the video team did an amazing job. The videos for almost all the sessions were posted within 24 hours. So if you didn't have a ticket, you could still get that information virtually at the same time. This year they're going a step further. They're going to stream the State of the Union, which is, so they have the keynote where Tim Cook and Phil Schiller come and show you all this stuff, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But then after that, they kick all the press out, and they have an NDA briefing. I think Craig Federighi might have done it last year. I don't remember, but they basically tell you what they're going to be working on for the next operating system releases. They're streaming that, and they're streaming the Apple Design Awards, the ADAs, live, so you can watch those without having to wait, without having to have a ticket. And to me, Peter, that just leaves the lab. So if you're a developer or designer and you need to actually go and talk to the frameworks engineers or the user experience evangelist or something and get specific help with your app, that's still invaluable. But if you just want to go watch the sessions now, all that pressure is gone. You can either stay at home and just watch them on the internet, or you can just go and have fun at WWDC, and when you get back to your hotel room at 6 in the morning after drinking yourself silly, pop in the sessions then.
Now, here's the thing about WWDC that makes the event so special, though. Whether you go to WWDC or not is really kind of incidental, because there's so much happening in San Francisco that week that is of great value to those developers. It's worth it for some developers to even fly in from somewhere else. It's certainly worth it for the Bay Area developers to just kind of pile on that part of San Francisco for that week. So I was actually talking to a conference organizer today who's he did Alt WWDC last year, and if you go to altwwdc.com right now, it actually goes to AltConf. There's an AltConf page. Mm-hmm. That's how it's being branded this year. But this is the alternative to WWDC. It's going to be a free to attend event. They're not going to have labs this year, I don't think, but they are planning on doing presentations and lectures and that sort of thing. We'll have more details posted about it in the coming weeks, but that's a great opportunity for people who don't manage to get a ticket to Apple's event to go to and actually get some enrichment out of.
So Disturbed Angel asked how many press tickets get offered. So what happens with the press is Apple has a small section inside Moscone West. Developers who have tickets at WWDC can line up and get in, and they have overflow rooms. Apple invites a very small amount of press. I think it's almost always the same amount, but it's hard to get into that. So it's never a large amount. And there was another question about scamming it, or people getting tickets and trying to sell them. That's really hard because you have to log in with your Apple developer account. You have to buy the ticket through your Apple developer account, and there's no transfers as far as I'm aware. So you have to show up with ID that says you're that person, and it's checked against your Apple account. And I don't know many people who would risk getting blacklisted by Apple to do any funny business with tickets.
About the only time I've ever seen that swapping occur is when you're actually getting into the venue. Like if you know a developer who's on his way out and you swap tickets. I've seen that kind of social engineering happen at the show for years, and I don't think Apple can really do anything to control that. But the bottom line is your ticket is an ID. It's a fingerprint that goes straight back to you. So if you were thinking about maybe trying to scalp these on eBay or something like that, just don't do it. You're going to get screwed in the end. You're going to lose your developer credentials, and you're going to be out of luck for future shows.
Just don't do it.
Just don't do it.
So getting back to what we anticipate seeing, it's not that Apple's predictable, but it's that they've put themselves on a fairly predictable course. They've said there'll be a new version of iOS every year. They've said there'll be a new version of OS X every year. WWDC remains the single they haven't done an April event, which they used to do a long time ago for iOS. They didn't do a special press preview like they did for Lion. So it makes sense to me, Peter, that we will see the first demonstrations and the first betas for both iOS 8. What is iOS 8's? I forget the code name for iOS 8. Some ski resort, like always. And OS 10, 10.10, much to Daniel Jalkut's displeasure, 10.10 Syrah at that show.
I refuse to call it Syrah. I'm going to call it Shiraz.
Shiraz. That was a previous version, I think.
I just like 10.10 Shiraz better. You know?
So yeah, all the OS 10s used to have cat names, and then Apple marketing liked them so much they started using them, and that meant that the development teams decided that, well, if you're going to use the cat names publicly, we'll make wine names for the internal references. And now you have wine names and cat names. No big deal.
That's exactly right. So, anyway.
So Tim Cook will likely come out. He'll talk to us about how Apple's doing, about Apple's core values. We might see another animated video. Mm-hmm. And then at some point, he'll turn it over to Craig Federighi. Now, for iOS 7, for iOS 8, I don't think we'll see a massive redesign. I think iOS 7 and 7.1. Sorry, 7 did the big redesign. 7.1 polished it a bit. Mm-hmm. I think now they have time to actually go in there and start working on more of the frameworks again.
More of the frameworks. Yeah, that'd be a good idea. The fancy stuff is done, and even the fancy stuff needs refinement, but now it comes down to the nitty-gritty of getting the most out of the operating system that you can, kind of like what Apple tried with Mavericks last year. It was not a big change year for Mavericks, but visually or, with anything to do with the interface, but it was just getting that plumbing straightened out, making it easier to do things.
It was Okemo. Sorry, Chad Mobley said it's iOS 8 Okemo.
Oh, Okemo. Okay.
Down to Okemo. Okay, I went that makes a lot of sense. And the way Apple works, and we've talked about this before, is the development in many ways is a continuum. And for example, we got background downloads in this version of iOS, but that was originally rumored for iOS 6 in the podcast app, and it just probably wasn't ready in time. And Apple split Springboard into Springboard and Backboard and ported over XPC a while ago, and that just means, so basically what that would allow you to do is have inter-app communication and headless apps, but they haven't surfaced that yet. There's rumors of a Siri API still, but how you handle collisions to me is unclear. Maybe a Touch ID API, but how you make sure that the yes/no tokens are validated is a question. So Apple's going to have their set of features that are pushed down, from Phil Schiller in the very top, the features that they think that they can market successfully, and you'll have a bunch of features proposed by the engineers that are sort of pushed up, and Craig Federighi and the team will look at those, go through those page by page, and that's probably already done. I'm going to guess that both OS 10.10 and iOS 8, I won't say they're feature locked, but I'm pretty sure that kind of stuff is figured out, and now they're busy busting ass to get the betas ready for WWDC.
So do you think the release schedule is going to be similar to the way that it was last year?
Yeah, I think we'll get the betas at the show. That just makes a ton of sense. So developers can get them right away and start because the sessions are going to be all about that. There's almost always sessions about the new stuff, predominantly at the show, and they're going to want developers to have their hands on it. And then we'll see them released sometime in the fall. But I'm less certain about 10.10, Peter. I can sort of see the path forward. I mean, there's been leaks of HealthBook, things about inter-app communications, better maps, all sorts of things, and that sort of makes a lot of sense. Those are the things that you would work on for iOS 8 once all the redesign stuff is done. But OS 10 is an even more mature system, and it's less obvious to me, aside from maybe an iOS 7-like redesign, what's really causing people pain there.
And I wish I had some good insight for that. I guess my problem is I have trouble seeing outside my own use case for OS 10. How about you, Renee? Do you have any strong feelings? Because I'm as vague on it right now as I think you are.
Yeah, I'm having they did introduce so the thing is, I was not surprised per se last year, but their focus on power users was surprising, given that previous teams at Apple would have considered those not as friendly user-facing features and probably would have put the kibosh on them before, like battery shaming. and some of those features probably would not have made it out. But it's a brand new Apple in many ways, and they did. So I think that makes it less predictable.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that that it could be something major, it could be something minor. I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Now, do they? Obviously, they see, that's the thing with these yearly releases, though. I mean, they did Snow Leopard, which they said had no user-facing features, but just the need to market something new sort of forces them. And I don't know if sometimes maybe it's not for the better to have that list of 8, 10 polls or that list of things that Federici comes out on stage and you see those slides for.
Okay.
Like, is Siri for Mac going to be a bullet point finally? Does that make sense? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think so, though, and let me tell you why. Because OS X already has voice dictation on it, and I don't think that the use case is there for people to take it beyond that. I don't think that Siri is necessarily an interface that's optimized for somebody who's sitting in front of their computer. Yeah, the other thing is, Touch ID. People have said they want Touch ID on their Mac, but the Touch ID works because of the Apple A7 architecture. Apple has not shipped any ARM-powered Macs, and to do the same on Intel, maybe it's possible, but could there be something where if you have an iOS device and you verify that with Touch ID, that would then establish a trusted Bluetooth connection and project the unlock?
For longtime listeners of our show, they've heard the spiel from you before, Rene.
They have. I've spieled it.
You are convinced that this is going to happen, aren't you?
I like the idea of something something you have, something you are as authentication parameters, because it gives a lot of multi-factor possibilities.
It does, yeah. No, I admit, and it's a very appealing idea, but the question always comes back to how you would actually do it. Because as you point out, you can do it in the ARM architecture that Apple's using on the 5S pretty easily and pretty effectively. Can you do the same in Intel? Well, Intel does have an analog to the technology that the ARM chip uses, doesn't it?
Yeah, I believe they have a secure enclave of their own, although I'm not sure if it works in the same way.
So maybe it could work through that. I don't know. I don't know enough about the Intel architecture to know for a fact, but I'm just speculating on one possible way that it could happen.
Yeah, I think all of that is really valid. The feature set, though, it's so interesting. Baby Panther is asking about iCloud. I would still like to see improvements to iCloud. I mean, it works better, but things like PhotoStream to me are not a replacement for what Google Plus or even Facebook or other services are doing, where they just take all your photos and you don't have to worry about them anymore. With PhotoStream, I still have to worry about my photos. I just like them stored, on the cloud. There's a bunch of interesting things I think Apple could still do with cloud services, both on the Mac and iOS.
Such as?
All right, so for example, iCloud profiles we used to have the ability to sync things like the dock. They did restore keychain sync on the Mac. I'm not sure it's as good as the old one used to be. It's a little bit different, but I'd still like my environment synced. I'd like my dock on one computer if I choose to go to the other computer. I would like perhaps a certain set of preferences. Like the settings are synced, but like my home screen layout is not. I would like Apple to enable me to have more synchronous environments. And
that is exactly where I think Apple has shown it's already gone in Mavericks, and where I would expect the company to continue to go in 10.10, because that synchronization, that making it seamless to transition between iOS and OS X is what having apps like Maps and like iBooks in Mavericks allows. It allows more of that seamlessness, and of course much tighter iCloud integration and some of those other features. So I would expect Apple to continue along this track wherever it makes sense. And really, it's all about erasing that barrier, that conceptual barrier between how my iOS device works and how my OS X computer works. So people who are, being introduced, especially to people who are being introduced to that ecosystem for the first time, really make a seamless transition from one to the other.
Neil Douglas is asking, can we get an actual file system on iOS? It drives him insane. No, you will not. Apple will not do that, nor do you really want it. So This is a discussion we have a lot, and if you didn't listen to Debug this week, I really recommend that. It's John Siracusa and Guy English going toe-to-toe about the future of Apple development languages, higher-level languages, and that kind of stuff. And the crux of the argument is we often state things in terms of solutions we think we want instead of problems we have. And often there are different, sometimes more creative, sometimes even more efficient solutions for our problems than the ones we think of. You know, the classic example is Apple's using Arc in Objective-C now instead of garbage collection. So my thing is this: I've wanted this for a long time, and Peter's going to say, you know, you keep talking about this too, but I'm going to ride this repetitive horse right into the rock here. What I want is to be able to get to my files on iOS. I don't necessarily need a file system to do that. There's been rumors now of a preview.app and a textedit.app on iOS, and the reason for that is that iCloud is locked in app jails. So if I create a document in preview on the Mac and save it in iCloud, or in TextEdit in Mac and save it on iCloud, I can't get them on iOS because there's no analogous apps. So the theory is you'd be able to open up Preview, see your documents, and push them to iBooks to edit, or you'd be able to open up your TextEdit file, see it, push it to Pages to edit. And that sounds like a horrible solution to me. Like, granted, I don't know the details yet. I don't even know if they're real, but on the face, that sounds like a horrible solution to me because it doesn't solve the problem. And I've said this over and over again, but if I use AI Writer today and I do a bunch of iCloud documents, then I switch to, for example, Byword tomorrow, those documents are all gone. If I want to move them to Byword, as far as I know, I've got to cut and paste every single one of them. Or if I do a bunch of work in AI Writer, decide I don't like it, delete it, if I ever want to get that work back, I've got to reinstall it. Again, that's a horrible user experience. So I'm going back, Peter. I'm going to say I still want files.app the same way we have photos.app. You press a button, it launches it, and it doesn't give you a file system, but it gives you a repository. And the way we have Image Picker that can open up in any app and give us access to our photos and movies in any app, we'd have Document Picker. So any developer could just request the iCloud Document Picker. It would present safe file types like .txt, .csv, and you could open those in any app that supports the format, and that would let you actually move those documents around.
That would certainly get us a long way to, you know, getting to where we need to be. But wouldn't that be sort of a file system the way that you're talking about it?
It would be in the extent that, you know, like Photos.app isn't a file system. Yes, there are photos there and you can organize them, but it's still a glob under the covers. There's not all these directories and multiple levels of directories. It's fairly flat. And I think if all you did was press a button and if you're in Pages or you're in another document and it showed you all your text files, I don't think anybody would be confused where those files live. They wouldn't be lying around the desktop. They wouldn't be lost in folders, but they'd still be accessible to you no matter which app you were using.
Oh, sorry. They'd still be accessible to you the way that... Okay, so where I get confused and where I think that people are likely to get confused is if you start opening up file formats for a lot of different applications, then it starts confusing the user because they start seeing these icons on there that may not actually have anything to do with their apps at all and may provide them with some jarring user experience, like, you know, trying to convert a Microsoft Word file, for example. Maybe you'll get some weird formatting. Stuff like that. That's what happens in OS X right now. That's the sort of thing that I would hate to see happen in iOS.
I agree with that. So I think that in my magical world, Document Picker would only present the file types that could be opened in the application that requested it. So if it's a text editor, it would only show you .txt files. If it's a spreadsheet, it would only show you .csv files.
Okay. All right. But how would you transition it from the way that files are sort of sticky to the apps themselves in your imaginary future world?
You would have them abstracted away so that they don't store in the local, or at least they don't. So the same way Camera Roll basically works, where if you're working on a photo, you can save it to Camera Roll. You'd be able to save it to Document Pile or whatever the analogous name would be to that, and then those files, that would let you punch through the sandbox in a safe, user-intervened way, but still leave the accessibility.
All right, we're going down the rabbit hole with this. Let's move on.
I need to borrow Leo's theme song.
There you go.
All right, the other thing that we could see at this event, there's been rumors for a long time about this, Peter. We've talked about it before, but if Apple were to finally release an Apple TV SDK, whether it's a full-on app store, and I'm not convinced we need that, but whether maybe it's just a game store, WWDC I think would be a good place for that because you'd have all the developers there, especially given Amazon's recent announcement. I think it was yesterday, right? Fire TV with a game store.
Yes, indeed. Fire TV is very interesting. It launches with over 100 games, and they're saying that more than 1,000 are going to come to it before too long. What's more, for $40 more, you can get yourself a dedicated game controller. Mm-hmm. Now, the games themselves are all real low cost or free to play, so it's the typical mobile fare. The typical fare that you would already expect to see on your iPhone or your iPad or your Android device. Because it is an Android device. It's running a special version of Android.
I think they call it Mojito.
Mojito. Nice. Anyway, that is where I would love to see Apple take the Apple TV, especially after the introduction of MFI, or made for iPhone, iPod, iPad game controllers, which came out with iOS 7 last year. It hasn't really gone that successfully. I mean, there have been some experiments, typically involving cases that you would apply to your iPhone, to turn your iPhone into a big game controller. But I don't see that as a real perfect solution because, quite frankly, if I want a lot more iPhone in my pocket, I want a lot more iPhone screen in my pocket, not a lot more iPhone hardware in my pocket. The ones that I've had the best experience with have been controllers like the SteelSeries Stratus, which is abstracted from the iOS device entirely. It's actually a very small controller that you can slip right in a pocket. Did a review, check iMore for details on that. And it's a nice piece of kit. That I could see working with the Apple TV beautifully. I would love to see that happen.
This is interesting to me on so many levels. Friend of the show, Guy English, when we talked about this a year ago for Talk Mobile, said that, and he's a game developer, if you weren't aware of that, he developed games for a long time, that game development is bound by the controller. The controller dictates a lot of what you can do. If you're using a keyboard, if you're using a controller, if you're using multi-touch, the games will tend to adapt to the type of control that's being used. And that's what's interesting about an Apple TV game thing. And well, actually, let's back up for a second. So there's been rumors for a while about a new Apple TV. Mark Gurman heard about it. I've heard vaguely about new hardware, but no timeline. He'd heard that it was maybe coming sooner rather than later. There were some articles in the papers about Apple maybe doing it as early as this spring. Also, a friend of the show, Jim Dalrymple, said that nope, it's not coming. The idea of new hardware is interesting, though, because what new hardware do we need? To be able to display, right now it's a single-core processor, a single-core A5 processor, 8 gigabytes of NAND flash storage, I think 512 megabytes of RAM. It's a highly constrained box because all it does is stream 1080p TV or lower. But to do 4K, you'd need more. I don't think 4K iTunes is on the horizon. But also to run games, you'd need more. You need more local storage. I think the Fire TV is 4-core, Peter, is that right? With 1 or 2 gigabytes?
Yeah, the Fire Core is, the Fire TV is a quad core. Yeah, absolutely. Whereas the Apple TV, I think, is still a single core. This is based off the same chip that the iPad 2 was running on.
So that would be interesting. If Apple did do even a game store, they would need the hardware to run that game, and I think that would be a really interesting thing for them to use. And I could see that being announced at WWDC, and given how successful, in some cases in spite of Apple, gaming has been on iOS, I think it would work really well. Now, to your point about controllers, that's the big question. Almost like how is the keyboard going to work on the iPad was the big question on 2010. Can Apple depend on their base having iPhones and iPads to use as controllers? Do they need an inexpensive controller? Would developers be able to make games that work on both a multi-touch iPhone or iPad as controller or a made-for-iPhone controller, or would they have to force you to pick one or the other? These things I don't understand as well yet.
Okay. I think that it would be nice if MFI game controller support just became invisible in the operating system, or just kind of a seamless user experience, regardless of whether you were using Apple's remote, MFI, or whatever you wanted to do as far as the actual interface itself is concerned. Let's keep that abstracted. That was a good move to make in iOS 7. I'd love to see it continue, especially in a device, a new Apple TV device. That would be a lot of fun, and not for the reasons of drawing people away from, let's say, the next Wii U product or the next Xbox product or the next PlayStation product. It's to draw more people into gaming and entertainment with their home television. You know, I came up during that first big wave of video game systems like the Atari 2600 and the Intellivision and the ColecoVision.
Yes, people, we played Pong.
Yes, back in our day, we actually had to go to an arcade, which was a physical place that was uphill in both directions through the snow, and we had to put these things called quarters in our machines. Okay, sorry, I'm kind of going on an old fart.
No, I think that's a good point, though. And so let me ask you this, because I just think that you know everything about gaming. That's just my normal assumption. Would Apple want or encourage or be able to have games like Titan's Fall or whatever the Xbox One or PlayStation 4 present, or would they be better off or just even okay sticking to casual games, having things that the kind of games that you see on iOS now?
I think they'd be better off with the casual thing. That's a lot more customers than the hardcore thing, or the very specialized thing. I think that you need to you run the risk of banality though when you try to appeal to everyone. Just witness Nintendo, which has, by any reasonable measure, just been left in the dust by what both Microsoft and Sony are doing.
Oh, Nintendo.
Exactly. So keep it casual, but don't necessarily make it mandatory that it's got to be casual, because like some of the best experiences that I've had on mobile devices are really hardcore games. They're just hardcore games that have been optimized for the mobile experience in very clever ways. And I don't think that that's any different. That's going to be any different if Apple TV moves in that direction. It's just going to be another canvas that the artists who are creating these games will be able to paint on.
So I played Real Racing, I think it was Real Racing 3 when they did Airplay and Party Play. I used to play Letterpress on my TV because it was a lot of fun. I liked, and I'm totally ripping Guy off here because we talked about it earlier, I like that Amazon had games like Minecraft set up and not just the Avengers.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that that's very smart. I think that that shows that there's, a broad range of stuff that's available for it, and to make it as non-intimidating as possible, which is what you want to do anytime you roll out a new system like this.
Disturbed Angel in the chat room says the cost of the box that could play Titanfall, oh boy. And I think that's a fair point too, because Amazon's box is $99. Apple's had a lot of success at $99 price point, and that probably constrains the kind of silicon you can throw in there.
Yeah, Disturbed Angel, Titanfall will probably be playable on your Mac at some point in the near future. So, well, at least if the guy who runs the studio that made Titanfall has anything to say about it.
That would be awesome, but it may not be playable on your Apple TV.
Yeah, Apple TV might be wishing a little bit much right now.
So the other thing is...
But wait, Renee,
Yes.
thing is, though, if you do have it running on your Mac and you've got an Apple TV in the house, you can always AirPlay the video.
Boom. You versus Air Force One.
There you go. It's done.
So the other thing that people are going to inevitably ask about is an iWatch or an iWearable or some sort of other device.
Yeah.
I don't think... If there was an incredibly important developer platform attached to it, I could see it being shown off at WWDC, but otherwise, I think that's an Apple product event. That's not an Apple developer event, unless, again, there's APIs that the developers especially have to get known about, but I don't see Apple blowing that wad, to use the turn of phrase, at the developer show.
Yeah, I'd be very surprised if I heard major Mac hardware announcements at the show.
Well, they have done. They do have a bit of a history of that. The Retina MacBook Pros, the 15-inch at least, was announced at WWDC a few years ago. Last year, the Haswell MacBook Airs were announced at WWDC.
Yeah, but the problem is that Intel's chip architecture production isn't where Apple really needs it to be making like any kind of major hardware announcements.
They're behind, right?
They're a little behind, that's right. So it'll be interesting to see how Apple handles that. But, as far as a wearable is concerned, I got to tell you, Renee, I'm still very reluctant to think that Apple's going to have anything that will appeal to me. I just don't see how it's relevant to how I use my technology. It'll be...
Again, without claiming any special knowledge, I can see it as an Apple TV style. And this was actually one of the most interesting things from Macworld is we had Ben Beharin on that panel. And what I like about Ben is a lot of the things that people like Peter and I, or any Apple reporter kind of feels instinctively just by doing research. Ben has numbers behind those things. And for example, he was saying, those big screen phones that sell so well in China don't sell as well yet in North America. But he was also saying that with wearables, the money is more in the fitness bands than it is in the watches right now, which is interesting. But that's sort of, all that kind of stuff makes me think that it would be an Apple TV-like device where nobody needs it, but if you get it, it would increase the overall value of the Apple ecosystem for you. And what I mean by that is sort of, I don't know the right way to put this, but that's where the sweet spot is for Apple, because replacing the watch will be hard. Many people don't wear a watch. The watch is jewelry, but a lot of people could just wear a band, even if they're wearing a watch at the same time. There seems to be a little bit of potential in that goes beyond what I think a lot of people first thought of when they heard about an iWatch.
Certainly, because there have been studies that have been done that show that wearables overall are not really developing any sort of long-term relationship with their users. Now, admittedly, they're talking about a very specialized group of wearables. I'm talking about products like the Fitbit and the Jawbone Up and stuff like that. But it goes to show you that there's a trap with new technology where it just isn't getting deployed in any kind of really personally meaningful way for people, at least not that they're able to develop any long-term behavior to use around. And Apple may be taking a wait-and-see approach to see how these products are being regarded. We haven't seen very good long-term use of the Galaxy Gear either. These products are
the nicest way I've ever heard that put.
Okay, yeah. I guess I'm feeling mellow today, so I'm not going to be rude to Samsung about it. But yeah, they're not selling that great these days, are they?
No, and the other thing that's still problematic here is the expectations that have been built up, mostly by analysts and I'm going to use quotation marks, analysts and media, who keep pounding the drum that Apple needs another breakthrough product because, and we've talked about this before, there isn't one. Phones are the biggest business we're going to see for the next many years. There's going to be nothing that eclipses the iPhone. The iPad has not eclipsed the iPhone. Everybody needs a phone. Phones create a lot of money. It's huge business. Yep. A watch, a television, a car, none of these things will be as big a business. If Apple made an iWatch tomorrow, it would be like the Apple TV. It would not be like the iPhone. And people, I think, really have to stop listening to people who would fuel their expectations otherwise.
I think that is a wise plan.
All right, so doubling back for a second, talking about the Macs, Broadwell, which is the successor to Haswell, probably will not be ready by WWDC, but we still haven't seen the new Mac Mini, Peter. That's still MIA.
And that's due for a Haswell update for sure.
Absolutely. So that could be updated with current technology. It could get the direct onboard PCI stuff that the Mac Pro did. There's a lot of interesting things they could do there, and there's still rumors of a Retina MacBook Air. Although I don't know if you could do that without Broadwell. I know Apple's probably dangling these ARM-based MacBooks over Intel's head, saying, we could pull this trigger at any time. It's a sword of Damocles. You better get those chips out. But I don't know if you would need better chips for the Retina MacBook Air.
That would be something, though, to see a completely Intel independent Mac running, because they exist somewhere in Cupertino.
They've had them for years.
Chained to a sex dungeon wall, wearing a GIMP mask, probably.
I'm not going to picture that, but I think those is sort of like the Intel versions of the Macs.
Okay, let me just set the stage then. It's a sex dungeon somewhere in Cupertino, and it's somewhere in the basement of one of these Apple labs, and it's just chained to the wall wearing a GIMP mask. I'm telling you.
Leather is not aluminum.
There's
aluminium,
a room full
sir.
of these things. There's a room full of these things. Well, there's aluminium as well, mainly in the straps and
all right,
some of the studs and stuff.
I'm not going to start picturing this. I refuse. You are not Quentin Tarantino, sir.
Oh, come on.
All right, you are. Yeah, so I think there's some interesting things that we could see with Mac hardware, and
sure.
Especially the Mini.
Yeah, no, exactly, and I think the Mini is at this point a shoo-in based on the schedule. We've been waiting for it, and it's overdue. So let's just assume that it's going to happen at DubDub. The question is, if a new Apple TV rolls out, Renee, this is the $64,000 question. Is it announced and released same day?
I don't know. I think if there is a development platform, even if it's just Game Store attached to it, then you would have the usual several months for developers to get ready, because Apple would want apps available at launch day.
Yeah, Apple would want apps available at launch day, but what's stopping them from reaching out to the developers that they want to make apps with and getting them to optimize right now?
Only tradition. I mean, for the iPhone, they announced in January and shipped in June. They did the SDK event in April and shipped in June. For the iPad, they did the event in January with the SDK, shipped in April, I think. So they've always sort of made it a fair fight by not just having a few handpicked developers, but letting everybody get their hand on the new SDK and develop for the new machine.
Fair enough. So the idea would be that this new machine with new consumer-facing features that would make it a good buying opportunity for people who are interested in technology to actually get it, and then just kick the can down the road a few months as far as getting developers to release products that are optimized to work with it.
Yeah, no, the only thing I think is that would suck for developers is that if the iPhone 6 is actually going to have a bigger screen, I don't think Apple will say word one about it at WWDC. Even if there are hidden or thinly veiled technologies that would help support it, they would wait to announce that at the iPhone event, and developers would have 10 days to get those assets changed.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, I don't think they'll get any. I don't think Apple would announce an iPhone 6 months, even 3 months ahead of time anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else I'm forgetting, Peter, that you think that we might see at WWDC aside from the videos, the presentations, the demos?
Well, there's always the question of what band is going to play.
It's going to be Disney, and I'm going to say it'll be from the movie Frozen.
Frozen, that's right.
Yeah, so I'm excited. I'm excited every year for WWDC just to see. We are sort of in a more mature phase now. Things aren't moving as quickly, but in some ways they're still changing radically, especially when you look back year after year. And there's several exciting ways they could go. And it feels to me like there is a substantive change. Like if you look at the WWDC page at Apple, they've got far more sessions. They actually call out designers. They call out a women's session. This doesn't feel like the WWDC of even a couple of years ago. It does feel like a new era, which we sort of talked about last year. With iOS 7 and Tim Cook really hitting that, this is our signature line. I think that we're seeing a continuation of that, and I like this direction a lot.
I do too. It makes it a lot more challenging to keep up with, but the rewards are certainly there.
Now, the last thing I want to talk to you about, Peter, is iWork got completely redone earlier this year. They took the iOS engine, they made it compatible across Mac, across iWork and iCloud, but it lost a lot of features. They've been updating and getting it back, but now they have competition from Microsoft Office. So I'm just wondering, do you think they've made real progress yet in putting those features back, or do you think there's still a lot of work to do and maybe we'll see more iWork and iLife stuff at WWDC as well?
Well, they've done more than move the needle. They've significantly, implemented missing features from the iWork stuff. What ended up happening, just to back up for a moment, is that iWork apps, at least on the OS X side, got completely gutted when Mavericks came out, and there was a big uproar initially from people.
Well, it was Next Era Code. I forget what company it was that they bought them from, but that code was hella old.
Yeah, that code was hella old, which is why it couldn't talk to the stuff on the iOS side without really having to jump through some inelegant hoops. So Apple reinvented the code on OS X. It used that iOS code as its basis, but that meant completely rebuilding the app from the ground up instead of just translating features over. And some stuff they decided to keep out of that initial release, maybe just because of their development schedule. Apple has been slowly re-implementing this, and this isn't the first time they've done something like this. People on the video side remember when Final Cut 10 came out. That was a huge change for people. It was a very jarring change from what people were accustomed to, right, Renee?
It was I mean, they did it with iMovie. They did it with Final Cut Pro. Logic wasn't too bad, but they've often decided that future growth is worth current pain.
Exactly, and very well put. So, iOS and OS 10, the workflow between the iWork apps is better than it ever has been, but it's been kind of a rebuilding year for the iWork apps on OS 10, and they're getting there bit by bit. Apple's not a complete parity yet, but it's getting closer.
All right, so maybe we'll see a little bit. I would like to see iPhoto for iCloud, for example, maybe even an iMessage. I'd love to see iTunes and iCloud. I know there have been rumors about Apple making iTunes for Android. I would much rather see a web-based interface that I can just play stuff anywhere that has a browser. Those are sort of the wild card things that I'm looking forward to.
That would be really nice. You know, I would love to see iTunes in the cloud the same way that iWork is in the cloud, for crying out loud.
All right, so Peter, before we go, I just want to remind people that we're doing a couple of really cool contests right now. We have the Element Case bundle. So Element Case has made some awesome new stuff, and they offered our readers a giveaway. And we're also, because I'll admit it, Peter, I was pissed. Amazon announced the Fire TV, and it's only available in the U.S.
Yes, I can feel your Canadian rage seething from there.
It's not. I mean, people complain that iTunes is locked to Apple, but Amazon is a horizontal lock-in as much as Apple is a vertical lock-in, and you know we still don't have Amazon MP3 in Canada. We still don't have Amazon Video. Still don't have Google Music in Canada. Most countries only have Apple. They have very few alternatives. We can get the Kindle Fire here now, but it costs a lot more than it does in the U.S., and it doesn't have Amazon Movies or Music. It's intolerable. So what I decided to do is to say, well, basically, screw you, Amazon. If you can't function internationally, we're going to give away Apple TVs, which do function internationally. So we got 3 of them, and we're going to give them away to, all you have to do is go to iMore, leave a comment, say what country you're in, how you feel about iTunes versus Amazon in terms of the content you can access. We'll pick 3 people. If you're in the US, fine. If you're internationally, fine, because, hey, Apple TV works internationally, and we will give them away. Technically, gift certificates, $150 gift certificates so you can buy one. But we're going to give them away. And all you have to do is go to imore.com/contests with an S. You'll see all of our recent contests there. All it takes is a couple seconds to enter, and I can, give a fanciful gesture in Amazon's general direction.
And I guess I can't enter, right?
No, unfortunately you're not allowed. But you're in the U.S. anyway. You have all the things.
That's true.
All right, Peter. So for anyone who might not know, where can they find you on the interwebs?
On the interwebs, you can get a hold of me at imore.com or on the Twitters at Flarg, F-L-A-R-G-H, and there.
And again, if you missed our Macworld coverage, please go to imore.com/Macworld2014. Listen to Vector, listen to Iterate. We had amazing, unbelievable guests on, and they said really, really smart things. So check those out. You can find me at Rene Ritchie on all the social things. You can find me at imore.com. You can find our entire team there. And I want to thank the chat room. They were super smart today. They helped me with a lot of things that I was stupidly forgetting. They are the most handsome, most intelligent chat room on the internet today, and we really appreciate them joining us. If you'd like to join us live, we are here almost every Thursday at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. British Summer Time right now, and if you missed that, you can grab the audio off iTunes. The video will be returning to iTunes. We finally got a new video host, so within the next couple of weeks it'll be back there. But in the meantime, finally, in the meantime, you can go to YouTube, youtube.com/imore video, and all the shows are there for you to watch streaming at your pleasure. Peter, thank you so much.
Except for the videos that I uploaded from Macworld because I screwed up.
No, I re-uploaded them. They're all there.
Oh, cool. They're all there. All right, awesome. Thank you very much, Rene. Thank you, audience. Bye.
And we'll see you next week. The quarterback is toast.